In this tale, a deadly illness that rapidly transforms people into ferocious, wild creatures spreads over the planet. The World Health Organization has unable to develop a treatment despite their best efforts. And before of their eyes, people watch helplessly as their loved ones change into lethal creatures. Emil and his father, Francis, get stuck in traffic on their way to the hospital at the beginning of the story. They start to disagree, which sparks an argument. Francis tries to calm Emil down by following him as he exits the automobile in a furious manner. Emil looks at a passing ambulance and hears a loud scream emanating from within. Francis hastily hides Emil behind a neighboring car after becoming alarmed. A few seconds later, the ambulance door flings open, revealing a figure, a man who is half bird and half human. Security personnel scramble to capture the mutant, but he escapes his capture. Following this, Francis and Emil visit the hospital to see the doctor where Emil's mother, Lena, was admitted for treatment. In actuality, she was also becoming a mutant, and for the past few years, many people all across the world have been gradually becoming mutants. These individuals eventually become extremely hostile. The doctor informs them that Lena's treatment is ongoing and that there is little chance that she will be fully treated. In fact, it is possible that she will never be cured. The government is currently making a lot of efforts to combat this illness. However, when the condition causes individuals to become violent, the government begins to segregate them so that a curative medication may be developed. And moving anywhere in this city would be beneficial for you. Emil was one of the mutants that most people now wish to avoid. Francis tells him, however, that his mother is still a member of his family. He then goes to see his mother, and as we can see, his mother had undergone significant alteration, and her face was covered with hair. Following this, we observe that Emil enrolls in one of the local schools, and that the father and son move to a new home in the city. The professors assist Emil get to know the other pupils by introducing him to the class on his first day of school. A student called Nancy questions Emil about his parents during the introduction. Emil responds that his mother has died and his father works as a cook. Nancy promptly apologizes to Emil after realizing that her question may have offended him. Emil has a strong affection for Nancy after witnessing her actions. Emil now gets home from school after this. Emil's home loses power that night due to a strong storm that is raging outside. Emil is roused from his slumber by the sound of the storm and the roaring wind. He sees a mutant outside who is peering inside his house as soon as he stands up and approaches the window. However, that mutation vanishes from view the following instant. Emil and his father discover a fallen tree that has blocked the front of their home because of the storm the following morning. They start to work removing it together. When Francis gets an emergency call, he and Emil quickly leave in their car and head to a certain place. When they arrive, they learn that several mutants were killed when an ambulance carrying them fell into a pond during the storm the night before. Francis is extremely upset by the scene because he was told earlier that his wife, Lena, was in the ambulance. Officers intercept him before he can get close to the site. Julia, a policewoman, intervenes to soothe him and clarify the circumstances. Some mutants escaped into the neighboring bush, while others perished in the accident. Lena, Francis's wife, was one among the escapees. Next, we witness the scene from the following day, where Emil participates in a tug-of-war match organized by his teacher. Emil pulls the rope by himself and defeats the opposing team after every student on his squad falls. Emil's team wins the game as a result, and the students all congratulate him after being astounded by his power. Then, one of them extends an invitation to Emil to attend a party, but Emil is preoccupied with his hands and experiencing an odd sensation. After this, he heads straight home, where he finds something in his fingernails and after much effort, removes it, causing it to bleed. After removing his t-shirt, he notices that his back is gradually changing shape as well. Seeing so many changes in oneself makes him extremely afraid. Emil was thus turning into a mutant as well. In the meantime, Francis met Julia while he was at the grocery store. He hears someone screaming out of nowhere. As soon as he learns that a customer has actually spotted a mutant, Julia orders her staff to leave the entire store. However, Julia begins accompanying Francis when he begins searching for that mutation. Perhaps this mutant could be Francis's wife, he thought. However, he discovers that the mutant is actually someone else who came to eat fish when he sees her. Julia pursues the girl after she starts throwing things at him and fleeing. But the girl starts hurling objects at Julia and keeps escaping. Nevertheless, Julia leaps and effortlessly catches her. The police then transport the mutant away in an ambulance. A scene from the following Friday is then shown, in which Emil and his pals are enjoying themselves at a party. At that point, Emil begins experiencing unexpected alcohol-related difficulties, for which Nancy prescribes medication. However, Emil takes that medication and oddly licks his hand. All of his buddies who are seated there begin to laugh at him after observing his actions. His joke embarrasses Emil, who immediately stands up and leaves. He finds himself in a nearby woodland while running. He wakes up the following morning to find himself laying beside a lake. He heads straight to his home. Shortly after arriving at the restroom, he removes his t-shirt and begins examining himself. He discovers abruptly that he has something lodged in his mouth. Emil must have hunted a bird during the night since a feather emerges from his mouth. Emil and Francis eventually make their way into the jungle to look for Lena. Emil asks his father on the way how his mother felt about changing into a beast. Francis claims that he never experienced any unusual feelings. She had just slightly changed. He still views Lena as his wife, though. They take a car and continue searching for Lena, yelling her name all over the woodland after a protracted search. They are still unable to locate her despite their best attempts. Thus, they finally nod off in the vehicle. Then we can tell that morning will arrive shortly. Emil's dog abruptly leaps from the car and begins to run in the direction of the woodland. Emil starts chasing after him right away. However, after arriving at one location, Emil is abruptly attacked by the same birdman that first fled from the ambulance. He is attacked by the beast. However, it recognizes that Emil is also a mutant as soon as it looks at him, so he pauses. Emil's father shows up to save him in the meanwhile. He then swiftly takes Emil and leaves the location right away. Francis proposes to take Emil to the hospital on the way. Emil, however, declines since he is aware of the potential consequences. They then argue as a result of this. A horse then unexpectedly comes in front of the car in the middle of it. Francis, however, takes care of the car and brakes at the appropriate moment. They then discover that they have arrived at a riding school where some horses have been attacked by a mutant. Officer Julia and her squad were there for that reason. When Julia gets there, she notices Emil's wound. What happened? She wonders. Emil replies that he was bitten by his dog. Thus, Julia brings him to the army camp, where Emil's shoulder is sutured by an army physician. Here, we learn that the army has also been called in to apprehend the mutants who have fled. Time is now gradually going by. Emil's body is also evolving all the time. Additionally, he begins to experience dreams that interfere with his day-to-day activities. He did odd things in class, and now he couldn't even pedal the bike correctly. Nancy asks what happened after noticing this. Emil excuses himself by claiming to be ill. After that, Nancy brings him to her home, where they converse for a while. Emil then discovers a dead bird whose color matches the feather in his neck as he opens the refrigerator to grab a drink. Nancy responds, "I found this bird dead outside, so I just kept it here." When Emil inquires about it, this reasoning seems odd to Emil. However, Nancy claims that she wants to give the army this bird so that the mutants can eat it. Following this brief encounter, Emil leaves, dives into a pond, and begins consuming fish. He then eats some fish and arrives in the same jungle where he was attacked by the same birdman. The birdman then rushes forward and falls in front of Emil. Emil offers to eat the fish that is placed in front of him. The fish is consumed by the birdman. Emil asks the birdman for his name after introducing himself. "My name is Fix," the birdman responds. Fix doesn't recall anything when Emil asks him about his previous life. Another small thing, who turns out to be a youngster, arrives in the meantime, picks up a fish, and begins to climb the tree. Emil asks Fix, "Is this your daughter?" After noticing this, Fix responds that she is only following me as she hasn't yet found a place to call home. Fix goes on to add that he doesn't have a home because he can't fly like a bird. In order to help Fix learn how to fly like a bird, Emil takes him to a nearby pond. To keep Fix safe while learning to fly, he begins clearing the pond of all timber. In this manner, Fix and Emil develop a close friendship. Emil then begins riding his bicycle home in the evening, but he is unable to ride it properly, so he becomes irate, throws the bike, and returns. However, Francis is shown in the restaurant's backyard when he witnesses a thing moving. Perhaps this is Lena, Francis wonders. However, Francis is attacked and beaten by a creature that materializes out of nowhere from behind. The restaurant owner then shows up and soothes the animal by identifying her as his sister, whom he had chained. But the animal escapes the chains and begins to run in the direction of the woodland. Francis, who believes that his wife Lena might be in the forest, also begins to rush in that direction. However, after seeing Francis, he departs after noticing another animal that appeared to be a bear. However, Francis tells Julia that he has seen Lena in the forest, so that his squad may assist him when Julia arrives at the dinner with the army team. Emil then sees his father, who informs him that he was late because his cycle was broken. The following day, Emil fixes the spot where he is practicing flying. However, despite his repeated attempts, he still stumbles a bit. Francis discovers Emil's cycle in the forest when he and Julia go there in the evening to look for Lena. Francis rides the bike home, perplexed by this. He discovers that the basin's line is clogged when he gets home and uses the restroom to wash his hands. He begins to open the pipe for that reason. He realizes that something is off with Emil, and that he is concealing something when he discovers some hair and broken nails within. When Emil returns home later, Francis shows him the nails and inquires as to who owns them. Emil admits he's not sure. Francis then demonstrates the cycle to him, saying, "I found it in the forest today. What did you go there for?" Francis says. Emil starts to flee right away. Francis, however, stops him as soon as he goes a little farther and says, "My son, I am with you. Tell me what took place." Emil breaks down in tears and informs him that he is also gradually becoming a beast. Francis assures Emil during breakfast the following morning that they would undoubtedly work things out. To evade the police, Emil agrees to have his hair and nails clipped for the time being. Emil meets Fix in the jungle the following day. Fix, however, was unable to speak today. His voice sounds like a bird when he attempts to speak to Emil. Fix was now going to take off to prove to Emil that he could fly, which made Emil very delighted. Francis visits Emil that same evening and says, "Where were you all day? What was the number of times I called you? You should stop wandering around like this." When he notices Emil's fingernails, he grabs a pair of scissors and declares that he must trim them. Emil isn't prepared to trim his nails, though. Emil then slices Francis's hand and leaves after Francis coerces him. He encounters Nancy after coming out, and she invites him to join him at his farmhouse. Emil accepts and they begin conversing. Additionally, they become intimate and very close to one another when conversing. Victor, a buddy, then shows up to greet Emil as he gets home. Emil, Victor had learned, had also been moved from the farmhouse to the farmhouse. He spends the most of his time in the farmhouse in this manner. Thanks for being with us.